Avoidants have a pattern. They are constantly in an on and off relationship behaviors, with some people where they return multiple times, despite repeated breakups. However, there are specific types of individuals they will never reconnect with once the relationship ends. These aren't necessarily the worst partners or the most incompatible matches, but rather people who trigger such profound psychological responses that coming back to them feels like eating a frog. The complex inner workings of avoidant psychology can show us why certain relationship endings become permanent, regardless of love, chemistry, or shared history. I want to point out that today's video has been heavily inspired by Carl Jung's work on the shadow. Recognizing these 4 types helps explain why some people never get a second chance with avoidant partners, even when the relationship had genuine potential or deep connection. The person with healthy boundaries who calls them out. The most counterintuitive reality about avoidant attachment is that healthy, secure partners often become the most threatening to their emotional system. When someone maintains strong personal boundaries and refuses to tolerate dismissive or inconsistent behavior, they force the avoidant into a position of accountability that feels unbearably exposing. Unlike partners who might chase, plead, or accommodate poor treatment, these individuals respond to avoidant behavior with calm but firm consequences, creating a dynamic that the avoidant cannot control or manipulate. This type of partner doesn't engage in dramatic confrontations or emotional appeals. Instead, they quietly withdraw their energy and availability when treated poorly, demonstrating through actions that they value themselves too much to accept breadcrumbs of affection or inconsistent attention. They might say things like, "I understand you need space, but I won't be available when you decide you want to reconnect." Or, "This pattern isn't working for me, and I deserve consistent treatment in a relationship." Their responses are measured, self-respectful, and devoid of the emotional reactivity that avoidants often use to justify their withdrawal. The avoidant finds this type of person simultaneously attractive and terrifying. Their self-possession and emotional stability represent everything the avoidant secretly desires but feels incapable of achieving. However, when this person begins holding them accountable for their behavior patterns, the avoidant experiences a profound threat to their carefully constructed defenses. They cannot dismiss this person as needy or dramatic because their responses are too reasonable and self-contained. They cannot project blame because this person takes responsibility for their own actions while refusing to accept responsibility for the avoidant's choices. This dynamic creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance in the avoidant's mind. They recognize the quality and desirability of this partner while simultaneously feeling exposed and inadequate in their presence. The healthy boundaries become mirrors that reflect back the avoidant's own relationship shortcomings, creating shame and self-awareness that their defense mechanisms cannot easily deflect. When someone refuses to chase them or tolerate poor treatment, the avoidant loses their familiar dance of pursuit and distance that helps them maintain emotional control. After a breakup with this type of person, the avoidant experiences a unique form of loss that combines grief with relief. They grieve the loss of someone they genuinely respected and were attracted to, while feeling relieved to escape the constant accountability and self-reflection the relationship demanded. However, the prospect of returning to this person feels impossible because they know they would face the same boundaries and expectations that originally felt overwhelming. The avoidant recognizes that reconnecting would require genuine change and vulnerability, commitments they feel unable or unwilling to make. The memory of being consistently called out on their behavior, not through drama or emotional appeals, but through quiet strength and self-respect, creates lasting discomfort for the avoidant. They may idealize this person from afar and recognize their value intellectually, but emotionally, they associate them with feelings of inadequacy and exposure that their psyche works hard to avoid. This creates a permanent barrier to reconciliation because returning would mean facing those same uncomfortable truths about themselves and their relationship patterns. Furthermore, the avoidant knows that this person has seen behind their mask and witnessed their authentic self, including their fears, insecurities, and relationship limitations. This level of being truly known feels dangerous to someone whose survival strategy depends on maintaining emotional distance and control. The vulnerability they showed to this person becomes a source of shame rather than intimacy, making the thought of reconnecting feel like returning to a scene of emotional crime where they expose too much of themselves. The secure person's ability to remain centered and unshaken by the avoidant's typical push-pull dynamics also removes the familiar chaos that avoidants often mistake for passion. Without the drama of pursuit and withdrawal, the relationship felt too stable and predictable for someone who associates turbulence with love. Yet this same stability is what makes reconciliation impossible, because the avoidant knows they cannot recreate the emotional distance they crave with someone who consistently calls them on their behavior. The clingy pursuer who has zero self-respect. While pursuit behavior initially triggers the avoidance flight response, there's a specific type of pursuer that destroys any possibility of future attraction or reconciliation. This isn't simply someone who wants more connection or struggles with the avoidant's emotional distance. Instead, this is an individual who completely abandons their self-respect and dignity in desperate attempts to maintain the relationship, engaging in behaviors that fundamentally alter how the avoidant perceives them as a potential partner. This person transforms from someone the avoidant once found attractive into someone they view with a mixture of pity, disgust, and contempt. The pursuer might engage in behaviors like showing up at the avoidant's workplace after being asked for space, sending dozens of unanswered texts, begging for reconciliation, or making grand gestures that feel more like harassment than romance. They might stalk social media obsessively, create fake accounts to maintain contact, or involve mutual friends in elaborate schemes to force interaction. The most damaging aspect of this behavior isn't the pursuit itself, but the complete loss of personal dignity that accompanies it. This person might beg, plead, promise to change everything about themselves, or offer to accept any terms just to maintain some form of connection. They demonstrate through their actions that they have no bottom line, no self-respect, and no standards for how they deserve to be treated. This level of desperation triggers the avoidance disgust response because it represents everything they fear about emotional vulnerability taken to its most extreme conclusion. For the avoidant, watching someone debase themselves in pursuit of the relationship serves as a powerful reminder of why emotional walls exist in the first place. They interpret this behavior as proof that emotional openness leads to humiliation and loss of self. The pursuer's actions validate every fear the avoidant has about what happens when someone cares too much or needs too deeply. Rather than inspiring compassion or appreciation, this behavior creates revulsion because it represents the avoidant's worst nightmare of what they might become if they allowed themselves to be vulnerable. The sexual and romantic attraction that once existed between them becomes completely destroyed by the pursuer's desperate behavior. Attraction requires some element of mystery, challenge, or self-possession, all of which disappear when someone abandons their dignity in pursuit of another person. The avoidant begins to feel embarrassed by association, worried that others will judge them for having been involved with someone who would engage in such desperate behavior. This dynamic also triggers the avoidant's superiority complex, a defense mechanism that helps them feel better about their own emotional limitations. By positioning themselves as the more composed, rational, and self-controlled person in the dynamic, they can avoid examining their own role in the relationship's dysfunction. The pursuer's desperation allows the avoidant to cast themselves as the victim of unwanted attention, rather than someone who contributed to the relationship's problems through emotional unavailability. The memory of this person's desperate behavior becomes permanently seared into the avoidant's mind, making reconciliation impossible even if the pursuer eventually develops self-respect and healthy boundaries. The avoidant cannot unsee the desperation and neediness that was revealed during the breakup process. They associate this person with feelings of disgust, embarrassment, and superiority that make romantic reconnection emotionally impossible. Additionally, the avoidant recognizes that someone who would abandon their dignity so completely for them possesses a level of emotional need that they can never fulfill. This person's behavior confirms the avoidant's belief that they are not capable of providing the depth of emotional connection that some people require. Rather than inspiring them to try harder or be more available, it reinforces their conviction that they should stick to relationships with people who need less from them emotionally. The pursuer's behavior also violates the avoidant's need for space and autonomy in such an extreme way that it feels like a form of emotional assault. The constant contact attempts, boundary violations, and refusal to accept the breakup create a sense of being hunted or stalked that makes the avoidant feel unsafe. This safety concern becomes another permanent barrier to reconciliation, as the avoidant fears that any contact might reignite the desperate pursuit behavior. The person who, the avoidant, thinks they don't deserve. Perhaps the most tragic dynamic occurs when avoidants encounter partners who represent everything they secretly long for, but believe they cannot have or maintain. These individuals embody the avoidant's ideal vision of love, partnership, and emotional connection. Yet their very perfection triggers the avoidant's deepest fears about their own worthiness and capacity for sustained intimacy. Rather than inspiring the avoidant to rise to meet this person's standards, their exceptional qualities activate core wounds around abandonment, inadequacy, and the belief that good things don't last. This person might be emotionally secure, genuinely kind, consistently supportive, and capable of the type of steady, mature love that the avoidant intellectually recognizes as healthy and desirable. They don't play games, create drama, or engage in the push-pull dynamics that avoidants often mistake for passion. Instead, they offer authentic intimacy, reliable presence, and the kind of partnership that most people would consider themselves fortunate to find. Their love feels too good to be true, which for the avoidant means it probably is. The avoidant's response to this type of partner reveals the self-sabotaging nature of their attachment style. Rather than feeling grateful or motivated to become worthy of such love, they experience increasing anxiety about inevitably disappointing this person or being abandoned once their flaws become apparent. They operate from a core belief that they are fundamentally unlovable or damaged, and anyone who seems to love them completely simply hasn't discovered their true nature yet. This creates a psychological pressure to reveal their worst qualities or push this person away before the inevitable disappointment occurs. During the relationship, the avoidant might engage in behaviors designed to test this person's love or prove their own unworthiness. They might become more distant, critical, or dismissive, unconsciously trying to confirm their belief that this person will eventually leave like everyone else. When this partner continues to respond with patience, understanding, and consistent love, it only intensifies the avoidant's discomfort because it challenges their fundamental worldview about relationships and their own lovability. The breakup with this type of person often occurs not because of any major conflict or incompatibility, but because the avoidant cannot tolerate the sustained pressure of being loved so completely. They might initiate the breakup with explanations about not being ready for commitment, needing to focus on personal growth, or feeling like the relationship moved too fast. These explanations mask the deeper truth that they cannot psychologically handle being in a relationship with someone they perceive as too good for them. After the breakup, The avoidant experiences a complex mix of emotions that makes reconciliation impossible. They feel simultaneous relief at escaping the pressure of trying to be worthy of such love, and profound grief at losing someone they recognized as exceptional. However, the prospect of returning triggers overwhelming anxiety about facing the same feelings of inadequacy and the pressure to be someone they don't believe they can sustain being. The avoidant also recognizes that this person deserves better than what they can offer. This isn't false modesty or fishing for compliments, but a genuine belief that they would be doing this person a disservice by returning to the relationship. They convince themselves that the most loving thing they can do is stay away, allowing this person to find someone more capable of matching their emotional availability and relationship skills. This dynamic is reinforced by the avoidant's black and white thinking about relationships and personal worth. They cannot conceptualize a middle ground where they might be imperfect but still worthy of love, or where they could grow into becoming a better partner over time. Instead, they view relationships as requiring a fixed level of emotional capability that they either possess or don't, and they've concluded that they don't possess what this person needs and deserves. The memory of this person becomes idealized over time, turning them into a standard against which all future partners are measured and found lacking. However, this idealization serves a protective function, allowing the avoidant to maintain distance from real intimacy by holding everyone else to impossible standards. They can pine for this perfect person while ensuring they never have to face the vulnerability of actual reconnection. The avoidant also fears that returning to this person would require them to maintain the same level of emotional openness and vulnerability that the relationship originally demanded. They remember feeling exposed and authentic in ways that felt dangerous to their sense of self. While they might miss the connection, they cannot tolerate the thought of being that vulnerable again, especially with someone whose opinion of them matters so much. The person who lost control during the breakup process and became hostile. The fourth type of person an avoidant will never reconnect with is someone who lost emotional control during the breakup process and became aggressive, hostile, or threatening. This behavior triggers the avoidant's most primal safety mechanisms and creates permanent associations between this person and danger, making reconciliation psychologically impossible regardless of the circumstances that led to the emotional outburst. When faced with the avoidant's typical breakup style, which often involves sudden withdrawal, emotional shutdown, or coldly delivered final decisions, some people respond with intense anger, verbal aggression, or threatening behavior. They might scream, curse, make threats about consequences, or engage in behaviors designed to punish the avoidant for their decision to leave. This person might threaten to expose secrets, harm the avoidant's reputation, or interfere with their work or family relationships. In extreme cases, they might make physical threats or engage in intimidating behavior that makes the avoidant fear for their safety. From the avoidant's perspective, this hostile response validates every fear they have about emotional intensity and confirms their belief that deep feelings inevitably lead to dangerous or unpredictable behavior. The person's loss of control serves as proof that emotional vulnerability and attachment create instability and potential harm. Rather than seeing this reaction as grief, pain, or desperation, the avoidant interprets it as evidence of the other person's fundamental instability and potential for violence. This response also violates the avoidant's deep need for emotional safety and predictability. Avoidants often choose partners, partly based on their perceived emotional stability and ability to remain controlled under stress. When someone explodes with rage, makes threats, or becomes verbally abusive during a breakup, they reveal a capacity for emotional volatility that makes the avoidant feel fundamentally unsafe around them. The hostile behavior also removes any guilt or ambivalence the avoidant might have felt about ending the relationship. Instead of questioning their decision or feeling bad about hurting someone they cared about, the aggressive response allows them to reframe the situation as an escape from a dangerous or unstable person. This psychological reframing protects the avoidant from having to examine their own role in the relationship's demise or feel empathy for their partner's pain. For the avoidant, the memory of this person's hostile reaction becomes permanently associated with threat and danger. Even if this person later apologizes, demonstrates changed behavior, or explains their reaction as temporary emotional overwhelm, the avoidant cannot separate them from the memory of feeling unsafe or threatened. The brain's threat detection system doesn't easily forget perceived dangers, and the avoidant's already hypervigilant nervous system becomes permanently activated around this person. The hostile behavior also confirms the avoidant's belief that they made the right decision in leaving, creating a narrative that protects them from doubt or regret. They can point to the person's aggressive response as evidence that they were incompatible or that the relationship was unhealthy, avoiding any need to examine whether their own communication style or breakup approach might have contributed to the explosive reaction. Additionally, the avoidant recognizes that someone capable of such intense emotional reactions possesses a level of feeling and attachment that they cannot reciprocate or handle. The aggressive response reveals the depth of the other person's investment in the relationship, which feels overwhelming and dangerous to someone who struggles with emotional intimacy. Rather than inspiring appreciation for being so deeply loved, it creates fear about the intensity of emotions they might trigger in others. The avoidant also worries about what this person might be capable of if they were to reconcile and then break up again. If they responded to one breakup with hostility or threats, what might they do if faced with rejection a second time? This fear of escalating behavior creates a permanent barrier to reconnection, as the avoidant prioritizes their safety and peace of mind above any residual feelings or attraction. The hostile person's behavior during the breakup also demonstrates a fundamental incompatibility in how they handle conflict and stress. Avoidants prefer to withdraw and process emotions privately, while this person's response shows they become more aggressive and demanding under pressure. This difference in stress responses makes the avoidant believe that future conflicts would inevitably escalate in dangerous ways, making long-term compatibility impossible. Finally, the avoidant's social circle and support network often witness or hear about the hostile behavior, creating external pressure to stay away from this person. Friends and family members who saw the threats, verbal abuse, or aggressive behavior become protective barriers who reinforce the avoidant's decision to maintain distance. This social reinforcement makes reconciliation even more unlikely, as it would require the avoidant to go against the advice and concerns of people they trust. The combination of fear, validation of their breakup decision, social pressure, and fundamental incompatibility in conflict styles creates an insurmountable barrier to reconciliation. Unlike other relationship endings where time might heal wounds or change perspectives, the memory of feeling threatened or unsafe creates permanent associations that the avoidance nervous system cannot overcome. This person becomes categorized as dangerous in the avoidance mind, making romantic reconnection impossible regardless of any other positive qualities or shared history they might have had together.